You. Yes, you sitting there on your IKEA couch, eating cereal for dinner, feeling pretty okay about yourself because you have Wi-Fi and a gym membership you haven't used since January. Let me ruin that for you. Because throughout all of human history, the rich have not just lived better than you, they have lived in a completely separate universe from you. A universe with gold cutlery, personal fan operators, and rooms whose entire purpose was to hold their hats. And today, we are going on a full tour of that universe. 15 civilizations. By the end of this video, you will feel so spectacularly average that you'll need a nap. Let's go.
Here's what nobody teaches you in history class, because history class is too busy making you memorize dates you'll immediately forget. The rich have always been absolutely, magnificently, jaw-droppingly out of touch. Wealth is as old as civilization itself. The moment the first human looked at his neighbor's goat and thought, "I want that goat, and also 3 more," inequality was born. And from that moment forward, humans with more goats than everyone else have spent their entire lives figuring out increasingly creative ways to show it. Gold robes, marble palaces, servants who did nothing but carry their shoes, banquets with food that no one needed, eaten off plates that cost more than a village. We're going to travel through 15 of history's greatest civilizations: Egypt, Sumer, the Indus Valley, China, Greece, Rome, Persia, the Islamic Golden Age, medieval Europe, the Mongols, the Maya, the Aztecs, the Inca, the Ottomans, and the British Empire. And for every single one, we are going to answer the most important historical question of all time. How unhinged, specifically, were the rich people? Spoiler, very. The answer is always very.
Ancient Egypt, the civilization that looked at the concept of showing off and said, no, you're not even trying. Watch this. First things first, the pharaoh wasn't just the richest person in Egypt. He wasn't even a person. He was a god, a living, breathing, occasionally sweaty deity wearing a double crown and a fake beard attached with a strap. Yes, the beard was fake. The most powerful man in the ancient world had a clip-on chin accessory, and nobody said a word, because he was a god and he could have you executed. The Egyptian elite lived in gorgeous, multi-roomed villas along the Nile. Painted walls, tiled floors, gardens with reflecting pools full of fish and lotus flowers, and the staff. Oh, the staff. They had chefs, musicians, wine pourers, and, this is real, people whose entire profession was to walk alongside them with giant fans made of ostrich feathers, waving them gently to keep them cool. Let that sink in. Someone woke up every morning, got dressed, and went to work, and their work was stand next to a rich person and flap a feather for hours. That was their contribution to civilization. And here's the best part. That was considered a good job. You had job security. The rich guy wasn't going anywhere. Neither was the heat. Career stability, excellent. Egyptian nobles also had professional mourners. When a rich person died, you could hire a group of women to come to the funeral and cry dramatically, wailing, tearing their hair, full theatrical grief performance, on demand. Which means, somewhere in ancient Egypt, there was a woman who, when asked at a party what she did for work, had to say, "I cry at funerals," professionally, and people nodded respectfully. Now, the food. Egyptian elites ate like royalty, because many of them were. Whole roasted oxen, figs, pomegranates, grapes, honey, wine from the delta, fine bread made from emmer wheat. But the real flex, what happened when they died. The average Egyptian got a basic burial, wrapped in some linen, put in the ground, done. The rich Egyptian got a team of priests, 70 days of mummification, a hand-carved sarcophagus, a painted coffin inside that sarcophagus, a stone sarcophagus around that, a burial chamber, a mastaba, possibly a pyramid, walls covered with instructions for the afterlife, all their favorite furniture, their jewelry, food offerings, and sometimes, small figurines called shabtis, who were magically supposed to do their work in the afterlife. They were so averse to doing labor that they packed tiny magical servants for after they were dead. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. These people invented the concept of working from home and then immediately outsourced it to pottery.
Sumer, the cradle of civilization. The place where humans first figured out how to live in the cities together. And immediately, some Sumerians decided they deserved more than others. The Sumerian elite owned massive estates, herds of cattle, warehouses of grain. They sat at the top of a proto-bureaucratic system so complex, so detailed, so obsessed with record-keeping that they had to invent an entire writing system just to track their stuff. Writing, the ability to record language, the foundation of all human knowledge, literature, philosophy, science, and history, invented so a rich Sumerian could write down 47 jars of barley, 12 sheep, nama, 3 goats. The first thing humanity ever wrote down was essentially an ancient Excel spreadsheet. We had one chance to make our first written words something profound, something beautiful, something worthy of the ages. We wrote, "Boss man has lots of grain." Humanity has been on a very specific trajectory ever since. But wait, it gets darker. The Sumerians had a burial practice called the royal death pits of Ur. When a great lord or lady died, they weren't buried alone. No, their servants, guards, and musicians were dressed up in their finest clothes, given small cups of poison or knocked on the head, and buried alongside their master. Apple cart archaeologists found them perfectly arranged, instruments still in hand, lying in neat rows. These people were recruited to die with their employer. Imagine your job listing: position, royal musician; benefits, free meals, free housing, free burial. Drawback, the burial is mandatory and happens when the boss decides he's done living. Apply within. The Sumerian elite didn't just want good service, they wanted it to continue in the underworld. And they were not taking "I quit" as an answer.
And now, a brief intermission from chaos to visit the one ancient civilization that was genuinely, annoyingly sensible: the Indus Valley. The wealthy elite of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa lived in 2-story brick homes with indoor plumbing, toilets connected to citywide drainage systems, running water in 2500 BCE. Meanwhile, in the rest of the ancient world, people were using a hole in the ground and a prayer. The Indus Valley said, "No thank you. We'll take infrastructure." Their cities were laid out on perfect grids. Roads were wide and straight. Every house had a trash chute built into the wall that led to underground rubbish bins on the street. The rich had private wells. They had standardized weights and measures so nobody could cheat at the market, regulated trade, civic planning, sanitation as a public priority. The Indus Valley elite lived in probably the cleanest, most organized, most livable cities on the planet at that time. And then, and this is the haunting part, they just vanished. Around 1900 BCE, cities abandoned, population dispersed, no final war, no volcanic eruption, no dramatic collapse. They just quietly packed up and left. The most competent civilization in the ancient world looked around at everything they'd built and apparently said, "Yeah, we're done," and filed out in an orderly fashion. Even their collapse was better organized than everyone else's. China, a civilization so ancient, so vast, and so deeply obsessed with hierarchy that they essentially turned social status into an Olympic sport. The Chinese elite wore silk, only silk. Now, silk is lovely, soft, beautiful. But here's the thing about silk in ancient China: it was a state secret. The process for making it, silkworms, mulberry leaves, the whole operation was classified information, punishable by death to reveal to foreigners. The luxury export market was protected like nuclear launch codes. So somewhere on the Silk Road, there was absolutely a nervous merchant trying to smuggle silkworm eggs out of China, hidden in a hollow walking stick, sweating profusely, definitely not making eye contact with border guards. History records that 2 monks eventually succeeded in smuggling silkworms to the Byzantine Empire around 550 CE. They hid the eggs in hollow bamboo canes. They risked their lives for worm eggs. Such was the power of silk. The imperial court was its own universe. The emperor, the son of heaven, was surrounded by thousands of officials, eunuchs, concubines, servants, and advisors, all organized into a rigid hierarchy with specific rules for literally everything. You couldn't just walk into a room and talk to the emperor. There was a procedure, multiple procedures. You had to bow at specific angles, stand at specific distances, use specific forms of address, just to say good morning.
Breakfast for the emperor involved multiple courses, prepared by specialized cooks for each food category, tasted by eunuchs for poison, presented in specific order, served at specific temperatures, and the emperor ate alone, behind screens, because watching him eat was too intimate an act for other mortals. He was literally too important to eat in front of people. I have met people like this. They're called difficult. In ancient China, they were called the son of heaven. History is just a matter of framing.
Greece, birthplace of democracy, birthplace of philosophy, birthplace of the idea that all men are equal. Well, some men. The right kind of men. Men who owned land, specifically. Men who weren't slaves, which was up to a third of the population. But those men, equal. Mostly. The Greek elite, the aristoi, which literally means the best people, a name they gave themselves, which is the most Greek thing possible, lived in comfortable homes, threw lavish dinner parties called symposia, and spent incomprehensible amounts of money on chariot racing. The symposium, the Greek dinner party, was an institution. You'd recline on cushioned couches, sitting upright at dinner was for barbarians and poor people, drink wine mixed with water from a large communal bowl, eat fine food, and then argue loudly about virtue, justice, the nature of the soul, and whether Socrates was being annoying on purpose. The answer, by the way, was yes, Socrates was absolutely being annoying on purpose. He knew exactly what he was doing. Chariot racing was the Formula One of antiquity, and just like modern Formula One, it was outrageously expensive, and the whole point was for rich people to show other rich people how rich they were, while occasionally someone crashed and the crowd went wild. Sponsoring a winning chariot team at the Olympics gave you more clout than any political office. You'd be celebrated in poems, statues erected in your honor. Your name would echo through history. So yes, the Greeks invented democracy, philosophy, theater, and the Olympic Games. They also built it all on slave labor while arguing about freedom. The Greeks were brilliant and deeply structurally hypocritical. They would have been very popular on Twitter.
Rome. If the Greeks invented the concept of living well, the Romans took that concept, threw it in a vat of garum, which is fermented fish sauce they put on everything, added a marble fountain, hired 600 servants, and called it Tuesday. Roman senators lived in the domus, private urban mansions with atriums, gardens, painted walls, mosaic floors, private dining rooms where guests reclined on couches because, again, sitting upright was considered low class. This was a whole thing in the ancient world. Everybody lying down to eat, surrounded by food. Every Roman dinner party looked like a very fancy hospital ward. The food at a Roman elite banquet was ambitious. Roasted peacock, stuffed dormice, flamingo tongues, sea urchin. One emperor named Vitellius, who reigned for less than a year before being thrown in the Tiber, which will become a theme, held a single feast that reportedly featured 2,000 fish dishes and 7,000 bird dishes. 2,000 fish dishes in one meal. That's not a dinner party, that's a maritime disaster. Then we get to the emperors, and this is where Rome really earns its place in history. Because Rome didn't just have eccentric rich people, Rome had eccentric rich people with armies, and that combination historically produces results. Caligula made his horse a consul of Rome, a government official with an official position. The horse had a marble stable with an ivory manger and a staff of servants. Whether Caligula was being genuinely insane or performing an elaborate satirical critique of the Roman Senate is a debate historians still have. Either way, horse, government position. This happened. Nero fiddled, or rather performed on a lyre, while Rome burned. He also kicked his pregnant wife to death, had his mother assassinated, and competed as an actor and musician at the Olympics. He was declared the winner of every event he entered. The judges made a sensible career preservation decision. And then Emperor Elagabalus. We need to talk about Elagabalus. We will come back to him, but I need you to keep his name in the back of your mind, because what this teenager did with the power and wealth of Rome is going to haunt you.
The Persian civilization, where paradise was literally a rich person's garden. The Persian Empire, under the Achaemenid kings, was, in terms of sheer spectacular grandeur, possibly the most impressive show of wealth in the ancient world. The Shahanshah, King of Kings, received tribute from 23 subject nations. Delegations traveled from every corner of the empire, bringing gold, exotic animals, fine textiles, and rare spices. The audience hall at Persepolis held 10,000 people. The palace complex took decades to build, using workers from across the empire, and according to surviving records, those workers were paid with food rations, silver, and beer. In a world of forced labor, the Persians were operating a remarkably organized payroll system. Persian nobles traveled in luxury curtained litters carried by slaves. They held elaborate court ceremonies. They kept enormous hunting parks filled with exotic animals imported from across Asia and Africa: lions, gazelles, ostriches, bears. These parks were called paradisos. From paradisos, we get the word paradise. The Persian word for rich person's private exotic animal hunting preserve became our universal concept of heaven. Think about that next time someone says life after death will be like paradise. What they're actually describing, etymologically speaking, is a billionaire's wildlife collection.
Okay, so if you thought this was insane, we're just getting started. We've only scratched the surface of how unhinged wealth could get across history, and trust me, it gets worse. Much worse. In the next video, we're diving into the Islamic Golden Age, the medieval, the Ottomans, the Maya, the Aztecs, the Inca, medieval Europe, the British Empire. We're talking emperors with entire rooms dedicated to outfits they wore once, rulers who treated gold like furniture, and civilizations where power got so extreme it stopped making sense. And yes, we are finally coming back to Elagabalus. You don't want to miss that. So if you enjoy realizing that history's richest people and kings and rulers were operating on a completely different level of chaos, subscribe, because the next part is where things go from "that's ridiculous" to "there is absolutely no way that happened." See you in the next one.